Well, the Charlie Kirk Saga and now Murder in Manhattan. Both of those are in the news this past week, and we're going to talk about all of that right here on Charlie Crimebuster's podcast. Some people are calling it the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals participating and do not represent those of city, county, state, or federal law enforcement agencies, nor sponsors and platforms of this presentation. The Charlie Crimebuster name and all forms and abbreviations are property of its owner, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent unless or until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains adult subject matter. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Charlie Crimebuster. Sure glad to have you aboard the Charlie Crime Train today. Today we're going to be talking about what has been in the news this past week. And of course that is big news now about Luigi Mangione and what happened there with the murder on Manhattan in, well, plain view, even caught on video. And we're also going to get you up to date on the Charlie Kirk deal with Candace Owen. And oh boy, that's brewing. That's really brewing. So we're going to talk about both of those on today's podcast. But let me welcome you. If you're a first-time listener or a seasoned listener, we really appreciate you being a part of the podcast family. Do me a favor, hit that like button and subscribe button. That way you will be notified every time we drop an episode. Glad to have you. Took a break last week. I had a little illness, a little bit of that flu bug or whatever it is going around. But we're back in the saddle today, and we're glad to get you updated on everything that's happening in both of these cases. If you'd like to reach out with a shout out, reach us at charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. You can ask questions. You can make suggestions about other podcasts or subjects you'd like for us to cover. You can even lodge objections. You say, hey, man, I just think you're way off base of what you're talking about. It is a safe zone, we say here at Charlie Crimebuster, so feel free to reach out.
The following podcast is brought to you by PeacemakerNetwork.com. PeacemakerNetwork.com. Audio is provided by Pixabay.com. That's Pixabay.com.
Hey, before we get right into the nitty-gritty, as we say, let me invite you to go over to PeacemakerNetwork.com. There you can read about those brave men and women who run toward danger instead of away from danger. We're talking about the military, those brave men and women there. We're also talking about law enforcement, and we're talking about first responders, those people that come running when we are hurting and are always there to step up. So check it out. That's PeacemakerNetwork.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can also find other episodes at charliecrimebuster.com. All right, first of all, let's talk about Luigi Mangione. He's back in the news today. If you remember, he was accused of killing Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare. And that, of course, was on December the 4th, 2024. Just about a year ago, right? Following the nationwide manhunt, we do know that he was finally arrested. The alleged murderer was arrested in Altoona, Pennsylvania, just 5 days after the shooting. To me, it seemed like a lot longer because everybody was looking for this guy. He was indicted on 11 state charges and 4 federal charges, including first-degree murder. Also, an offense of terrorism, criminal possession of a weapon, stalking. And they are seeking the death penalty in the federal case. Now, that terror charge, well, it was dismissed. But he still faces a charge of second-degree murder. Well, there's more things happening in that case, and we're going to be talking about that in today's program. When you think about this guy, you know, what really stands out to me is this guy had everything going for him. He was really comes from a very nice family. He was born there in Maryland, Towson, Maryland, and actually a Baltimore area couple of Italian descent. Had two older sisters, and they were pretty well off. He attended a very nice school, a private school, an all-boys school in Baltimore. He was the all-American young Italian guy. He played sports, soccer, track, cross-country, wrestling. But he, as a lot of people his age, did develop a great interest in video games. And, get this, video game development, which can be quite lucrative. He taught himself how to code. He even co-founded a gaming app development company. And what was really interesting to me when you look at his bio, in 2016, he just not only graduated, but he was the valedictorian of his class. And his speech talked about the impact, get this, all the way back there in 2016, he was talking about the impact of artificial intelligence and technology and how that impacts society, something that's very much in the news today with IA. He was there all the way back to 2016. He attended the University of Pennsylvania. He graduated cum laude 2020, has a Bachelor of Science degree in engineering, computer engineering, a Master of Science in Engineering and Computer and Information Science. Now, I'm saying all this to simply say this guy had everything going for him in life. He had it made. And, he even had a good job when he left and everything going for him. He even served as a counselor at Stanford University Artificial Intelligence Pre-Collegiate High School. So here was a guy who had a lot going for him, who had a very, very bright future, and now he's sitting in a jail cell. Being accused of murder, facing the death penalty perhaps. So what in the world happens to a guy who has all these things going for him and then walks up to the street? Now, in all of this, we want to make sure that we're very careful that we don't forget the victim. The victim of this was Brian Thompson. And, of course, he was the CEO of United Healthcare. And right on December the 4th, he was shot and killed early in the morning, right at the entrance of the New York Hilton Midtown Hotel. And the really interesting thing about that with this crime, it was captured on video. Right, captured on video. Thompson, he was shot twice, once in the leg and once in the back. Now, he was there because they had a big conference there, United Healthcare. The United Healthcare Group, which was the parent company of United Healthcare. And he was there at an annual investors meeting. And the suspect that shot, when they described him, the police did, said it was a white man wearing a mask. Remember that word, wearing a mask. That's important in the update today about this case, because you're saying what you're sharing with me, I've heard before. Yes, you have, but I want to get you up to date. There's some new things that happened this week we're going to talk about. But he was wearing a mask. Remember that. And they also had spent cases that they picked up, the cases that are ejected from a weapon. And there were words written there. Now, we're hearing more and more about words being written on these cartridges, these cartridges at crimes. It's happened more than once now, and you probably heard about it. But it really came to the forefront during this case a year ago, because written on those cartridges were the words delay, deny, depose. And that's very similar to words that you hear in the insurance company, which kind of alludes to the fact that the insurance try to do everything they can, people think, to avoid paying claims. And they use the words delay, deny, defend. Delay, deny, defend. Well, he put delay, deny, depose on those cartridges. The alleged killer put that on the cartridges. And that was very interesting when we studied about it. But as I said, there's going to be some new things that are surfacing this week about that. Now, there was the suspect after that shooting was actually revealed on video. They did find that he was also seen on a bus terminal. That's after the shooting. And in Central Park, not too far away, they also discovered a backpack, which they believed the gunman had. And in that backpack, interesting enough, was Monopoly money and a Tommy Hilfiger jacket. Now, the Monopoly money, I think, was some sort of allusion or some sort of message that these insurance companies are just in it for the money. They don't care for the little guy. They don't care for the guy that's hurting. All they want to do is make more money. And so this became kind of a political assassination, if you please. Now, we're also talking about another political assassination, the Charlie Kirk assassination. We're going to get you updated on that saga as well. But after a 5-day nationwide manhunt, The local police did arrest Mangione at a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. He was arrested on December the 9th, 2024. And this is where it all gets interesting, because this week's court hearing, is all about what happened at that arrest. That arrest there, where the police responded after an employee there at McDonald's made a call, and they noticed similarities about Mangione's appearance and the images of Mr. Thompson's alleged killer. That was released by the New York City Police Department. Now, Altoona, Pennsylvania is not in New York City. It's about 280 miles west of New York City. And the police did report that he really was visibly shaken when they asked him if he had recently visited New York City when they were talking to him there at the McDonald's restaurant. And we do know that when he was there, they did search his backpack, found a 3D printed gun and a 3D printed suppressor, all that similar to the weapons used in the shooting. And in this was also a ghost gun, by the way, a ghost gun. Now, when we say ghost gun, we're talking about a gun that cannot be traced, that's made, and it doesn't have that serial number where you can easily trace where a weapon is purchased and that sort of thing. So it's called a ghost gun, and that was something that was really coming to the forefront back a year ago in that. So this story has all the American terms that people are interested in. You talk about gun control. You talk about the police involvement and what the police can do and what the police can't do. And then a biggie, you can talk about what's happening in the area of the economy with people having to pay so much money for health insurance. So there are some people who are really getting on the bandwagon of a political assassination. And this is sad to me because, we should never celebrate somebody who murders somebody in cold blood. And this was a murder in cold blood in Manhattan. It was a murder in Manhattan. It was a murder of someone in cold blood, of a husband, of a father, for goodness sakes. And yet, to many, this guy, Mangione, is actually a hero. He's getting all kinds of money that's donated to his defense fund. And in some circles, he's being held as a hero. Well, this guy actually was in the news this week. And we're going to talk to you all about that in just a moment. We're also going to get you caught up on what's happening with the Charlie Kirk saga in just a moment. But right now, it's time for us just to take a moment, pause a little bit, think back, and maybe smile a little bit, relax a little bit. Because every week we share with you what we call Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Well, now, our Crazy Crook story today, it has to do with something that all of us do. We don't talk about it. It's not really public consumption. But every now and then you just have this urge that you have to go to the bathroom. You've probably had it many times when sometimes it was a little embarrassing to have it. And boy, you had to get to that bathroom as quick as you possibly could. Well, our Crazy Crook today is a guy up in Troy, and he actually is facing in Oakland County charges. They're saying he's facing those charges after police caught him. Now get this. They caught him peeing on the roadside there in the area there outside of Troy. And it was outside his pickup truck. It was around 2:30 p.m. on November the 16th of this year. Troy police responded to an area of southbound I-75 at Crooks Road. It was a report, now get this, of a possible drunk driver who was swerving and driving on the shoulder. And they said he was in a 1995 Ford F-150. Now, when they found the vehicle, it was stopped on the right shoulder of Big Beaver Road. And according to the police report, officers observed the driver, who was 66 years of age, from Rossville, and he was urinating outside the vehicle. Now, when they spoke to him, they noticed, and you notice this if you've been on the street like I have and other officers, you can certainly smell the booze. The man was then asked to perform, well, you know what comes next, the sobriety evaluations, or you call it the drunk driving test. He did, but surprise, 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 he performed poorly. And so then, of course, following that, there is the BAC test, and it was 0.94, so he was certainly above the limit. And then he was arrested without incident, taken to the Troy Police lockup. Now, he did agree to the chemical breath test with those results, and he was issued a citation for operating while intoxicated. They call it OWI up there, not DWI. So, my friend, this guy who just had to go, man, he just had to go, and he just decided he had to go right there on the road, pulled over to the side of the road, got beside his pickup, and boy, took a whiz, and that whiz landed him in jail. So probably, my friend, if you've had too much to drink, you probably ought to find somewhere else to use the restroom rather than just pulling over on the roadside. So the police, the po-po, can catch you, because then you're not only going to take a whiz, but you're going to take a trip. And this guy was locked up. So this guy, this crazy crook, who was crazy enough to drive while intoxicated, was also crazy enough to get outside beside his pickup and take a leak. He is indeed Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Well, now, Lugi Mangione, he's back into the news, and we're going to tell you about all that court happening. But we did also promise on today's podcast, we mentioned in our beginning, that we're going to get you caught up on the Charlie Kirk saga. And boy, some things really happened this week to heat that up as well. And we can't get into that saga without, first of all, getting into what's happening with Candace Owen. She's still at it, and she's still putting the word out there, but a little different situation happened. I was about to build this podcast on this whole topic. I was going to call it Showdown at the OK Corral, because Candace Owen has been implying that Turning Point USA, which is the company that Charlie Kirk founded, she's been implying that somehow people in the leadership there are involved in this assassination, and at least to the point that they're covering up what really happened to Charlie. And she's throwing some really outrageous things out there. Now, I don't think I told you, but Candace Owen also has at one time said that she doesn't believe that we actually landed on the moon. So, I mean, she's got some really far out stuff there that she mentions on her podcast. And it's so interesting to me that these things are so outrageous, and yet she has the number one podcast in the country, in the world probably. Yeah, in the world. And she's got all kinds of people that are listening to these outrageous things that she's saying. So she keeps saying, hey, I would wish somebody would take me up on this. Well, why is Turning Point USA not saying anything? Well, surprise, surprise, friend, they did say something, and it was a whopper. As you know, we've been covering some of these charges that she's been really lodging against TpUSA. And so this week, finally, Turning Point USA finally spoke out. And boy, did they speak out. On their show, Blake Neff, TPS USA, they actually publicly challenged Candace Owens to appear on a live stream to answer her allegations about Charlie Kirk's 2025 death and accusations that she has been making continuously about TpUSA leadership. In fact, they were talking about it, and they were saying that we're getting more pushback from her and her people than we are even the people on the far left that come out against us. So they just said, hey, let's have this showdown. I was about to build an entire podcast on this. I was going to call it Showdown at the OK Corral. So this invitation was very specific. It was inviting her in person at their studio in Phoenix, Arizona, for a live show, which was meant to address each of the allegations that Owens had raised. They actually framed it as a chance for her to speak her point, and then they were going to publicly debunk what they have called a flood of allegations. In other words, they challenged her to a public live debate response, open, direct, no pre-approved questions, and it was all around her claims. Now, it appeared that Owens was going to accept this. Initially, she accepted the challenge publicly, saying, pick the time, pick the place, let's do it tomorrow. She said she wanted it unscripted and raw. She said she would bring whatever documents, messages, and evidence she had, and she did push for unfiltered live stream. So at first, all of this seemed like this was going to align with what she asked for, an open, honest, no moderator confrontation. But here's where it gets messy. The situation broke down as TpUSA set the logistics. They had picked December the 15th, 4 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Phoenix time, and they scheduled the live stream to be held in their Phoenix studio. And that would give Owens a public window to confirm by the end of the day. Well, Owens comes back. She says she only learned the details on social media. Said they never contacted her directly. She objected to the in-person demand. She said she couldn't make it on those terms. But she did offer to join virtually from her own studio. And she talked about scheduling conflicts with her own podcast, personal concerns about fairness, transparency, and control. So TpUSA comes back. They reject that and said they're just going to proceed without her. Now, there are some people who do argue that this in-person appearance turned the challenge into what some people are calling a trap, that they were almost going to corner her where she would have to agree on those terms. But the challenge was public and formal. It was confrontational, and it was controlled in format and location. And Candace Owens has said that she would go any place, anytime, anywhere, but now she's backing down. And they're coming back and saying the same thing happens over and over with her. She throws out these terrible, terrible allegations. And then when she comes back, she's not willing to really put up the receipts to show that what she's saying has substance. And as I've said often on this program, what she's saying is not validated by second-party people. In other words, you don't find the same validation process that the main media usually does in bringing news to the forefront. So here we are with Candace Owen, who said that she would debate anytime, any place, anywhere, and now she's backing down. So the saga is continuing about what's happening with the Charlie Kirk assassination. She's alleging everything. She's saying that the United States government is culpable in this. She's saying that the French government is a part of it, that they were part of the assassination. She even said this last week or so that the French government had hired somebody to assassinate her. Outlandish, really, really far out stuff she's saying. And she's not backing it up, and she has an opportunity to come forward and confront these folks that she says are complicit in a cover-up with Charlie Kirk's shooting, his own team, his own organization, and she's backing out of that. So there's where we are there. All right, let's get back to Lugi Mangione's case now. The whole hearing this week was about some of the evidence that was actually brought to the prosecution. And the defense is trying to challenge how that evidence was obtained. In other words, there was no warrant when they searched his backpack, and his Miranda warning wasn't issued right off the bat. And so his lawyers are arguing that this evidence should be excluded. They're arguing that the police conducted a warrantless search of his backpack after the arrest at the McDonald's in Altoona, and they're claiming that, of course, it violates his Fourth Amendment rights. Now, that bag, it did contain some very, very incriminating stuff. It contained a handgun, a 3D printed ghost gun, ammunition, a red notebook with writing that prosecutors say that writing shows the intent to kill a healthcare executive. Now, the defense attorneys are also arguing that the officers that questioned him, they questioned him before reading him his Miranda rights, meaning that any statements made could be inadmissible. They're also even challenging non-witnesses' identification testimony, people who didn't see the shooting, but later identified Mangione from the photos. Now, because of these arguments, they had this last week, several days, a suppression hearing in state court. And the judge is going to decide whether he will toss the evidence that's contested. Now, prosecutors, they're maintaining that backpack search was justified. They're saying the search and seizure was lawful under the circumstances. And the courts do have a precedent for allowing warrantless searches incident to arrest. There can be searches incident to arrest. And I know that from being on the street. And those are mainly to ensure the officer's safety and to preserve evidence. And certainly at McDonald's, it could be an argument there that if a guy there is really suspicion of murder and there's a backpack within his reach, then an officer has a right to search something where there might be a weapon, and indeed there was a weapon there. So I think there's going to be a very, very strong argument here that they did have the right to do a warrantless search of that backpack to ensure the officer's safety. There's also another part. You can do, it's called exigent circumstances. If you believe that evidence in a crime could be tampered with, evidence in a crime that could disappear if you did not immediately try to obtain and secure that evidence, you have the right to do that without a warrant. Now again, that backpack has gun, ammo, and writings. They are central to the state's case. The prosecution's arguing the evidence is strong, and it's critical to proving motive and the action. So, what are the big guys saying? What are the people who have the know saying about this? Basically, what they're saying is that while motions to suppress are common, they rarely succeed in fully derailing or weakening the case. So usually the court will come down on the side of the prosecution. However, my friend, I got to tell you, that's not a slam dunk. Now, it's really going to be how the judge ruled. The judge is going to have to say, was the backpack search permissible under circumstances, warrantless incident to arrest, search incident to arrest? Were the Miranda warnings properly administered before questioning? If the judge rules in favor of the defense, this is going to be huge. Because if they rule in favor of the defense, the gun, notebook, and statements identification could be excluded. And that very well could seriously weaken the prosecution's case. Now, if the judge denies suppression motions, almost all evidence really puts the prosecution in court with a very, very strong case. Now, you may ask me what I think. Well, given what I've seen so far with courts in my limited lifetime, I think that it's possible that some of the evidence, perhaps the notebook and statements made without Miranda warnings, could be suppressed. But I do not believe there's going to be a total wipeout of all key evidence. I believe the gun, the ammunition, I believe the diary identification, I believe that's going to be very, very unlikely. I think that the courts often allows warrantless searches incident to arrests. And again, we go back to what I said earlier. An officer has a right for their own safety to search anything around a potential suspect to make sure that there's nothing dangerous that could cause them bodily harm or even death. And in this situation, they were very right to search that backpack because inside that backpack was a weapon, folks, a weapon. And if the warrantless search subject to arrest does anything, it certainly is there to protect an officer's safety. So I think the judge is going to come down on the side of the prosecution on that they had a right to check for their own safety. They may throw out some of the statements he made, but I'm not sure that they need those statements because they've got plenty of evidence right there in the backpack, and I believe that search is going to be held as a reliable search by the prosecution. But we don't know yet because the last day of the hearings, the defendant, Lugi Mangione, he was ill and he could not attend, so it's going to be delayed. So we're not going to really hear about that until this week. Whatever, my friend, this is going to be one humdinger of a trial, and we're certainly going to cover it at Charlie Crimebuster. Let me remind you also, we have done an entire series on this murder in Manhattan. Go to our YouTube channel and you can find, just put in the search bar, put in Mangiane's name, and you're going to see the podcast that we've done on this subject already. Kind of get you caught up, kind of get you ready. And what's going to be happening? I don't know yet. This still is coming up where Turning Point USA is going to have this airing coming up. They're going to talk about what Candace Owens has said, and they're going to debunk it. Will Candace Owens be a part of it? We don't know yet. Right now, she's saying no. Some people saying that she will. Well, we'll find out. A lot of things to happen this next week. And be sure, Charlie Crimebuster, ye old crime-fighting buddy, will be right there to report back to you what we find out this week. So until this time next time, let me take a moment to remind you, be safe, be vigilant, for the life you save may be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. We would like to thank our sponsor, the Peacemaker Network, and also encourage you to support the first responders, military, and law enforcement personnel by contributing to the Peacemaker Network. That's peacemakernetwork.com. All music and sound effects are courtesy of Pixabay.com. That's Pixabay.com. You can also support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, tag @CharlieCrimebuster, and then click the subscribe button. By doing so, you'll be notified each time we drop one of our shows. Another more convenient way for you to listen to our podcasts, or for you to say to your smart speaker, play Charlie Crimebuster. If you have comments or suggestions, we would love to hear from you, so please send them to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com, or you can call or text us at 407-917-2211. That's 407-917-2211. Thank you for listening, and we hope that you will join us again for another exciting crime episode with Charlie Crimebuster.